בוקר טוב לכולם. Good morning, everybody. My name is Aryeh Ben Simchon. I am the director of ELNet, European Leadership Network in Paris. And I'm very pleased this morning that we have two very distinguished guests coming from France. The first one I have the pleasure to introduce is Mr. Jean-François Copé. Jean-François Copé is currently the mayor of a city in France called Meaux. He's a member of the Parliament, National Assembly of Representative of Seine-et-Marne. It's a town near Paris. He is a former budget minister and spokesman of the government, and he is also the president of the most important friendship group in the National Assembly, the friendship group between France and United States. He has been the main leader of the French opposition from November 2012 to June 2014. Following his graduation in 1989, he was at the National School of Administration, the very famous school in France. He joined the Caisse des dépôts et consignations, where he stayed until 1991. He then worked as head of the cabinet and CEO of Crédit Local de France. Then he got involved in politics within the former RPR, which was the most important political organization of the right, the former Neo-Gaullist party. He became head of the cabinet of the Minister for Relations with the Senate and the Parliament between 1993 and 1995. In 1995, he won the municipal election in Meaux, a town of 50,000 inhabitants, 50 kilometers east of Paris. In 2002, he has been elected member of the Parliament. He has until now been re-elected in both functions. In 2002, President Jacques Chirac appointed him spokesman of the French government. Between 2004 and 2007, he was budget minister. He is the last French budget minister who succeeded in simultaneously decreasing public spending, debt, deficits, and taxes, which is not so bad, by the way. In 2007, he became the president of the majority group of the UMP in the National Assembly. In 2010, he took the head of the fight to ban the burqa in France, and there is a law that is having the name of Jean-François Copé against the burqa, which is very important in France. The same year, he has been appointed General Secretary of the UMP. From 2012 to 2014, he won an historic victory in the municipal election in March 2014. In June 2014, he resigned from this function. And today, he is candidate for the primaries of the right, which will take place in November 2016. And he hopes to be the candidate from the right and the center for the next presidential election, which will take place at the beginning of 2017. We are very happy to invite Mr. Jean-François Copé to speak to this distinguished assembly. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure and a great honor for me to be with you in this very prestigious Congress and very prestigious university. I'm asked to speak about the role of the European Union in the world stage and in the Middle East, which is a very wide topic, because to talk about the role of the European Union on the world stage needs to give you some figures that are very significant. The European Union represents around 24% of the world GDP, when the US has 22%. And the same way, European GDP is 7 times bigger than Russia's one. But at the same time, Europe is an economic giant, but at least a mid-size diplomatic power. So the question that is at stake is to see why the European Union has failed up to now to build a consistent and credible European diplomacy. The way that Europe is still unable to find a solution to the Ukrainian crisis is one example among many others. So therefore, I would like to share with you 2 essential questions. How can we explain the weakness of the European foreign diplomacy? And can we make Europe great again, and how? Why is European diplomacy so weak? First of all, it's an issue of legitimacy. The lack of democracy is also relied to the fact that there is not an elected government of the European Union. Consequently, the European Union diplomacy is not legitimated by the universal suffrage. And there has been, at the same time, a shift of power from Europe to the United States and from the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. And as everybody knows, nowadays we face a new shift of power from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, which is to say that European nations are not as legitimate as they were 70 years ago. Second reason, a psychological reluctance of European leaders and population to endorse diplomatic responsibilities for the European as a global entity. You know that very well. The trauma of the dreadful World War has pushed many European nations to abandon the will to play a political and military part. The Cold War accustomed European states to rely on the United States to defend themselves. The fall of the Berlin Wall has made Europe believe that we were entering an end of history era. But the real question is that by living in peace for 70 years, which is a great historical chance in Europe, this means paradoxically that lead our continent to a difficulty for leaders and people to think war, to think the enemy, and to engage in solving international conflicts. And then the third thing is, of course, the fact that inside of Europe there are conflicting interests. European Union has been inefficient to manage itself the consequences of the collapse of Yugoslavia. The current migrant crisis shows that it's a big failure in Europe to manage an immigration policy, and at least the situation that everyone keeps in mind, the profound disunity of Europe during the Iraqi crisis at the beginning of the 2000s. So can we make Europe great again? Is federalism the solution? Of course not, for many reasons. Let me give you one: psychological reluctance of many heads of states in Europe to share their power with a sort of supra-authority which is not elected. This is a psychological issue. When you are a political leader in your country, you are running all your life to campaign to be elected. You have to raise money. You have to do the best to be elected. How can you accept then, after your victory, to say to someone who is not elected, you will be my chief? This is just impossible. The second thing is that doesn't mean we renounce to any European diplomacy. In my opinion, there is a need of Europe in the world. We have an expertise that everybody knows in financing economic project development. We have an expertise in maintaining peace. We can be very useful to contribute for peace in the world. But at the same time, if Europe renounces to any diplomacy, it will also renounce to any political goals. And as we are few days before the decision of the British for Brexit or not, this question is very important. So how to build a new diplomacy? It's to combine states' prerogatives and interest and European common values. What is at stake? It's the question of leadership again and again. There is no big policy without big leadership. In Europe, we assume common values that you perfectly know: democracy, liberty, pluralism. We must acknowledge that it's impossible to conduct a single foreign policy for 28 different states because there are conflicting interests between the state members. So the real question is to see how we can combine common values and common interests. That is to say, Europe must rearm. If you want peace, prepare yourself for war. This is the old proverb. Let's give an example. France today, and I would really want to notice that with you and to mention that the remarkable effort of my country, France, to be very much involved with lots of courage in Mali, or also inside of coalitions in the Middle East against ISIS. Diplomacy without force is like weightlifting without muscles. Soft power is important, of course, but beside, not instead of. And this is to say that we have to think about what can be a real strong defense policy for Europe. And what is at stake, of course, is the part of Great Britain and France, but also the part of Germany, which is, as everybody knows, one of the big issues on this particular question. What could be a European diplomatic approach for the Middle East, which is a very good example of what we could do to be useful? First of all, the current peace process in the Middle East, which could be an example, needs to take into account the reality of the ground. We need to be much more pragmatic than we are today. Let's develop it. First of all, as having been here for years and years, I think that really we should avoid making any kind of moral judgments from abroad. It's always much easier from Paris, London, or Brussels to say what should be done. When you are in the ground, it's very, very different. So, as I've been coming here for years, I think that we should be more modest in the way we are saying things. The second thing is that we need to accept that peace cannot be imposed from outside. We had a very interesting and relevant experience of that a few weeks ago with the French initiative. The international community has to facilitate and create the conditions for dialogue and to guarantee respect of a possible agreement, of course, but at the same time, it cannot substitute to the one who have to discuss together. Everybody must keep in mind that the resolution of this conflict wouldn't mean, and this is the second idea, the end of the Middle East problems. We have many things to do in order to help, but that will not be the way for us to resolve all the problems we have to face in this part of the world. Furthermore, on the Israeli soil, I want to assume with you that our main enemy is common and that our main enemy has a name, Islamic terrorism. It is the same fanatical terrorism that has hit the streets of Paris and has bloodied the streets of Tel Aviv. And it's the same Islamist terrorism that has killed people in Orlando last Sunday. And this is the same Islamist terrorist that threatens the stability in Egypt and slightly destroying Libya. So I think this is exactly what is at stake. Let's not waste our strength in accessories fights. Priority is there. We must join our forces to eradicate this global terrorism. That has declared war on the Western democracies, such as France, but also Israel and many other countries. We are fighting for liberty, pluralism, freedom, tolerance, equality between men and women. We must eradicate it with all the means we can use in legal democracies. This implies a union of democracies and secular regimes against this common danger. And in this sense, Israel, Europe, must cooperate much more closely than we do today. And I think that France and Israel have many things to do together in this field. And then, it's not forbidden to have a dream. For the long term, we can imagine a new organization in this part of the world with an equilibrium. Iran, Saudi Egypt for Sunnis, Iran for Shias, Saudi and Egypt for Sunnis, Turkey and Israel. 4 poles to manage with a reasonable balance of power the stability in this area. This is a kind of dream today, but we need a goal. And the first thing, the prerequisite of that is, of course, to fight against Islamist terrorists. So as a conclusion, Europe's main role is to facilitate talks by being able to speak to everybody. France has also a major part to play to help to bring solutions to come over some conflicts. But Europe needs to be backed by some of its main state members, able to invest in military budget and capable to show that there is no great diplomacy without great military strength. Thus, let's keep in mind few principles. Yes, I know. We have common values. We have also common interests, like security, but also economy, trade, culture. So let's put at the same time level common values and common interest instead of choosing one against the other. Today, this means that we must gather ourselves to fight against a common enemy of choosing again Islamic terrorism. So no doubt and no choice. This must be today the priority for Europe as a main target to eradicate these barbarians. All the countries which share this goal will be our ally. As a French political leader running for presidential elections, this will be my first priority, to convince all our partners that we need to remobilize and rearm for peace and stability. Thank you very much.